Hello, good afternoon and welcome to my step-by-step video on how to create a collagraph. In this video I will show you how to create a collagraph portrait. For this demonstration I have created a pencil drawing of a famous artist called Lucian Freud, taken from one of his paintings, and I shall show you how to turn this portrait into a collagraph, which we will produce on this cardboard plate. The first step that I will need to do is to separate the areas that will be the dark areas and the light areas. To do this, as we will see in this drawing, we can tell that with the pencil drawing we have highlighted those areas of shade, tone, and the darker areas. I will highlight this using this felt pen, therefore making it easier to distinguish those areas that I need to remove and then stick onto the plate. The plate has been cut to a relative size. This is just a normal piece of cardboard, recycled. It is about 3 millimeters thick and it is cut at a size of approximately 16 by 17 centimeters. The first step with this drawing is to convert these pencil lines into felt lines. This process will allow me to decide which areas need to be removed and which areas need to be retained and adhered to the surface of the cardboard plate that I will stick in place using PVA glue. As you will note, I am sketching black lines on top of the pencil lines, giving me an idea of those areas that I need to keep. The idea is, using a pair of scissors, I will cut away the areas that are white, leaving the areas of the black pen, and it is with the black areas that I will stick onto the cardboard plate. The idea is to try and simplify the image just concentrating on those areas that are specific to the form of the portrait. I do not want to get too bogged down with detail. My major concern is just to create the basic form of Lucian's portrait. Picking out those areas that are the most important to create the structure of his face. One of the most difficult things to consider when working with a portrait like this is to differentiate between those areas of light and dark that are the more important areas. Trying to decide upon which areas will add to the creation of the image rather than overcomplicating it. As you will note here, my concern is mainly the larger areas of dark. And only those areas that add to the image rather than detract. Through this process, I'm making sure that the areas overall will be linked to one another in some way, so as to make it easier for me to separate the white areas from the black areas. Therefore, when cutting away the areas that I do not need, it will make it easier for me to lay those areas onto the cardboard print keeping the image whole. So there is the whole portrait. As you will see, I have joined up most of the black. I will probably join up other areas. Now all that's left for me to do is to remove, cut away all these white areas. So here I have a pair of small scissors that I will use. Alternatively, if you're an older learner or an adult, or have adult supervision, you could use a scalpel knife, which is a bit more intricate. But for the purposes of this step-by-step, I will use scissors, as these are safer than using a knife. So the first thing I should do is remove the background. Now you can use this process with any portrait or a cartoon figure, a comic strip figure, an animation. What I will do here is I will just set it down. I'm just going to score along the bottom here. That way then I know where I can remove that. And for the purposes of this, I shall draw around the outline . So then I have that as a template to place the pieces. As I say, I do not need the white areas. All I need is the areas that I've coloured in with the black felt pen. Being careful just there because I do want to keep that outline. And what I can do with this small piece, if I want to keep these feathered areas, I can now just use the scissors to feather the end. Those. It is tricky when cutting these areas, so you do have to keep your mind focused. Try not to get too finicky with little bits. It'd be fine if you leave some areas. So as you can see, just take it step by step, like so. So as you can see, I fast forward and I've now cut all the black felt areas out. So I've got all the pieces here. So what I should do now is just move those to one side. You don't have to make yours as complicated as mine. I think I've made mine a little bit complicated. But now we've got that. Now I'm going to use the PVA. I'm going to apply a layer of PVA within the outline shape that I drew earlier, and this will allow me then to place these pieces within that outline and reconstruct Lucian Freud's face and shoulder on this plate. So as before, I have a little tumbler with some water in it. This will allow me to water down the glue a little. This will now act as an adhesive and a sealer. Okay, so now I've put that down like so. I'm just going to add a drop of pure PVA. Just spread that around. This will make it a little bit more tacky, ready for the pieces of paper to adhere to the surface. Okay, so the first thing now is I'll do all the bits that have the areas that go to the outlines. Be careful when putting it on, because sometimes your fingers get sticky and it can lift off the paper. Find the ear, the side of the neck. And got the shoulder areas. Bottom of his hairline. Underneath his bottom lip. His eye. And finally his nostrils. Okay. I'll just go over the top carefully with PVA, just to gently place some pressure over the top, as well as adding PVA over the top, which will seal the paper. Once I've done that, then I will do the outside or the background. I want to make sure that I don't get any pieces of paper stuck anywhere else. I want to keep that quite flat, but then it's ready for some texture. Now I'm going to add a little bit of pure PVA and go over the top just to reinforce, and then I shall leave that to dry. And whilst I'm waiting for that to dry, I will look out for some materials to add as texture. Again, be very careful when applying this layer. You don't want to pull off the paper, like what I've just done there. So there we go, so that's why I should always be careful. Okay. And then I'm just going to run along the edges, make sure that's all sealed. There's a bit of paper there. Okay, so I'm going to leave that to dry. Once that's dry, I will then add another layer of PVA just to make sure that that's completely sealed. So that's the first layer of PVA glue dry, so I'm going to now add a second layer. I'm going to use the watered down version first. Okay, and then I'm just going to add a little drop of pure PVAA, and spread that about. I'll just add a nice sealed, varnished surface. Okay, so that's where we're going to leave it, and what I'll do in the next video, the part 2 of this Collagraph portrait, I will go through some of the textures that I'm thinking of adding into the image to give a little bit of variance in its textural quality. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I will see you in part 2. Happy creating.